This video is sponsored by Knuckles OX, Crimson Manifesto, and Jelpy. We resume as war is broken out in the ninja world. However, for our purposes, much of our view of these events shall be streamlined, as seen in interpretations like the Storm games. And really, what we're interested in here is the very early section of the war, where we see Zabuza and Haku revived and rematched with Kakashi. So we're putting our focus into more central characters and the directly different things that would change, since the general trend of this story is greater strength for Naruto, which in turn means lots of his allies and rivals are also at a higher level from chasing after his back. So in general, they would perform better than they did in canon, even during the later sections of the war. And the best I could likely do with respect for time is small excerpts about just how more slightly badass they are, probably leaning into the meme of this really being what if more Naruto characters use swords or bladed weapons, seeing all the Konoha gang and the Sen siblings that haven't yet showcasing some new special technique inspired by Naruto, Zabuza, and Sasuke's love of the blade, likely also seeing them all get a small moment for a tag team attack of some kind with Naruto and one of his shadow clones once they enter the battlefield. Otherwise, our most significant change to the fortune of the World War so far is the more powered up heroes and the foe's side lacking a few, though it should be noted that Kisame is a potent addition to the enemy forces in this Edo Tensei reincarnated state, since while Zabuza made sure to double tap and kill him, he did not destroy his body or leave nothing left, meaning Kabuto very well could retrieve a bit of him in this timeline, so his departure from the world of the living is very short-lived. Still, other than this, things are fairly evened out. For instance, Asuma is still alive, so Shikamaru's group would thus never run into him as an opponent on the battlefield, on top of the fact that at least Shikamaru would already be performing a lot better than his canon self, using the upgrades in his attack potency through his weapons like the Kokuto and trench knives, now able to boast a slight mastery of each, and thus now worthy of inheriting Raido Namiyachi's will of fire alongside Asuma's, seeing the Nar really distinguish himself and stand out as a reliable asset to the alliance. Speaking of Asuma, as it is already such an emergency, along with the fact that he's doing well both in his recovery and physical therapy with Lady Tsunade, plus the fact that he still wants to protect his now growing family, he will personally be asked by the Fire Daimyo to join the guard protecting them from being taken as ransom or hostage, thus accepting experimental prosthetics and an assignment to take up his old cloth, ×5 in this era, becoming a second in command of this new form of the Guardian Shinobi led by the Mizukage, alongside shinobi like Chojuro, still missing the Hida Makade, and some talented Chunin and Tokubetsu Jonin from each village. Among them of note is our dear Udon, since the fully Jonin level forces need to be dedicated to the warfront, though the glasses-clad boy could take solace in Lord 5th Hokage and Master Kakashi personally suggesting him for this task, by reason that he would work well alongside Chojuro in this mission, as Zabuza once likened the two, seeing the meek Miss Swordsman put in a mentoring and leadership role, joining up with Zabuza's students to support his missing weapon, and also keeping Udon's mind off his own allies, as he can't help but worry that Konohamaru and Moegi are going to do something crazy without him there to anchor them, meaning as Master Zabuza would put it, he needs to cut these white Zetsu things down and join the main fight as soon as he can. So for the most part, things such as battle plans, members of the different companies of the Allied Forces war effort, and their individual makeups don't change much, with Kakashi still as the captain of the 3rd Company, and the likes of Sakura, Rock Lee, and my guy, 100% due to not fighting Kisame or traveling from Turtle Island in this continuity, are there to back him, while instead, that little exhaustion debuff is more so going to our unlikely and unwilling protagonist, Zabuza Momochi. Though tired after defeating his rival, negotiating Killer Bee's relinquishing the Samehada, and then consoling and reining in the sentient sword, he must still move on, and as quick as he can, though he may be a few minutes or so behind that freak guy's speed. Hence he's made a stop or two, even helping out at a few battlefields, one of which is luckily the one his current target is at, allowing him to quickly drop in and collaborate with Asuma, Udon, Mei, and Chojuro to drop the wave of Zetsu threatening their position and buy a window to rest. This downtime allows for Zabuza to ask for a stats report, and in turn, follow through on his promise to the Hidden Mist and the Mizukage, handing over the village's recovered new scroll of swords, as well as a crossed out Hidden Mist headband. While she is more than overjoyed about this, she grimly informs he'd likely do better to keep it for now, as the Intel Division has just received reports that a large group of resurrected Kekkei Genkai rulers has engaged Kakashi Hadake's Company 3, one of which is the so-called Demon Child of Ice. Though before this allows Zabuza to grow wistful, Asuma warns that that's not the only reunion you should expect, since apparently past members of the 7 Ninja Swordsmen have been spotted as well, not skipping the chance to poke fun that his drinking buddy isn't a very good blade keeper, it seems. This, however, puts pep back into Zabuza's step, instantly recognizing his responsibility is twofold, while the Mizukage instead defends him by informing to leave Jonin about the difference in the village's current so-called Master Scroll and that of the former Battle Scroll bearer. It had the same Master Control seals to summon the blades to oneself and their allies, and was entrusted to a man called the Second Coming of the Demon, as he was able to wield each one individually, making him essential to coordination as well as keeping the blades out of enemy hands should the wielder be defeated. So when his life was lost, so was the scroll, hence the village making a new one. And so knowing this is the true final step in reclaiming and re-establishing the 7 Ninja Swordsmen, Zabuza quickly finishes refueling with an MRE, while hurriedly looking for some non-traded clothes to change into, ones using the new Shinobi Alliance headband for the battle ahead. Here though, Mei convinces him to fight in the colors of the mist, even though he's a bit unsure of this at first, unsure if he's earned it. Udon is more than happy to scoff at that idea, as he knows for a fact that he has. But as Zabuza mentions this, Mai supposes the 3rd Company is a ways away, so he'll really owe her one if he wants to make it on time as well. Puffing under fresh bandages knowing what she's getting at, he supposes that'll work, and stating she's welcome to come collect if he lives. In turn, the Kage flashes him a smile, and says as a promise, they'll be wed, while the Hokage's guards surround their adopted ally, activating the flying Raijin together, the likes of Gimler instructing Lighter's replacement to stay focused, as Shinobi quietly asks how the swordsman got so lucky. Lighter erupts around him, as Zabuza finishes donning the regalia of the village he once fled in disgrace, and secures a scroll of swords to his back, chuckling that he doesn't think luck has all that much to do with it. Haku had awoken, and as expected, Master Zabuza was not with him, nor was he in control of his own actions, being forced to fight as a pawn in someone else's conflict, in a seemingly undying body, all while leading horrible monsters into battle to commit atrocities. And though that sickened him, the fact that his opponents were once again consisting mostly of quite young shinobi did more so. However, one of his new force companions, a rather sharkish man who bears an eerily similar vibe to Zabuza's, is all too delighted to be resurrected. Because of his painless and peaceful death at the hands of Zabuza, the shark believes himself to have simply suffered a bad dream, or an injury, and now he's getting a chance to go up against an old rival, the noble green beast of Konoha, whom along with his student don't really seem to recognize this guy, though like many of the shinobi identifying their once dead allies, Haku sees a familiar face. Upon closer inspection, he notes this young ninja is the very same pink-haired kunoichi from Mr. Kakashi's squad, now grown and capable of dodging even his swiftest Senbon. And not long after, the man who took his life himself appears, halting their unit's advance alongside Guy as the leader of this battalion. Having stopped the enemy charge successfully, the son of the White Fang greets Haku sadly, while filling him in on the situation. This of course raises the question of Master Zabuza's fate, and though Kakashi knows it's not his place, he is not cruel enough to simply return Haku to peace himself without letting him know. And so, he explains it all, that Zabuza survived, and went on to do every bit of the hard work in proving that he really was more than a tool for others to use for butchering, helping him to train up Naruto and Sakura, getting his own team, who become excellent shinobi in their own right, and that overall, when that man does die, it will be as a human. This revelation overwhelms Haku, with him feeling both elation that he completed his life's goal, and yet jealousy that he was not there to enjoy any of this, all while his body continues to try and push past Kakashi against his will, only for the joining to prove his words of friendship and training with Zabuza true, exerting strength similar to the demons and throwing Haku off balance before attempting to quickly immobilize him with the lightning blade. At the same time, Kisame gets his long-awaited rematch with the likes of my guy, and though he is still confused on what exactly is going on, or more importantly, where Samehada is, he is also a bit too bloodthirsty to truly care, happy to give in to the buzzing at the back of his brain to slaughter the Alliance, even if he has to truly scrap like a beast, using only his fits of the Shark Fang Taijutsu and Ninjutsu, challenges the Leaf Johnny would see little difficulty overcoming, since they lack the true oomph of a Kisame in his living state, or simply if he were armed. And thanks to the CQC nature of this fight, as well as Guy having more familiarity with Zabuza as a friend than he does with Kisame as an opponent, he eventually does recognize him, but as Zabuza's fishy and unyouthful rival, noting by the looks of him the other swordsman followed through on his vow and bested him, a reality Kisame is very angered by and unwilling to accept. But in this idea of acceptance lies newfound strength and strategy, seeing Kisame at one point even take advantage of his newfound undead constitution to make use of one of his broken legs as a club, tearing it off and finally catching Guy off guard with something, as this gives him both more reach and access to Kenjutsu techniques once again, at least temporarily, as the torn limb regrows fast enough for him to wipe out the shinobi who try to conceal it, Kisame slinging the torn limb hard enough for the papery texture that makes up their bodies to be turned into a barrage of high-speed razors. But unwilling to allow comrades to die, Guy leaps into the fray to protect them, batting these away as best he can, and thus leaving himself a bit more vulnerable for an attack of opportunity by Kisame. However, the Shark Man should have been watching the budding shinobi under Guy's care closer, as Rock Lee is quick to support his master in this moment, snagging him out of the air in the nick of time, and moving to bury him in the ground with a hidden lotus so that he may be sealed. Recognizing their dire predicaments, this forces both Kisame and Haku to rely on their allies, who employ Scorch and Explosion Release abilities to help them disengage, at least before they can all be tied down and sealed. However, as they do, Kawato decides he's allowed enough reminiscing, and so grants his thralls extra power to buff them attack, and more importantly, exert harsher control and suppression of the soul, forcing them to fight fiercer and perform more hyper-coordinated actions, such as summoning a group of Edo Tensei shinobi to the battlefield that most of them had never met, all in order to overwhelm their opponents. Seeing this, Kakashi knows he will have to take Haku's life again before he can deal with this, but just then, a mist rolls in for the Allied Shinobi Forces, allowing them to fall back into it and avoid the attacks of the enemy, whilst the Executioner's blade iconic subtle slicing of the air is the only signal Kakashi or Haku are given before the blade is buried into the ground between them, its wielder appearing on its hilt, as Zabuza claims Kakashi can relax that bleeding heart of his, as he'll handle his own mess. Though as he says this, Kakashi knows he hasn't turned him yet, likely doing his best not to tear up seeing Haku. More than understanding the emotions involved, Kakashi leads the pair to this long-awaited proper party, telling Zabuza not to be focused on the battle around him, whilst he in turn tells the Leaf Johnny to stay on his toes against Kisame and those swordsmen, wiping his eyes as Haku seems to break the trance of Edo Tensei, greeting him with a kind and warm smile. Seeing his now former rival and armed with the scroll he has stolen, Kisame is forced to reconcile with his own death, showing enough personality to curse the man, even while stunned under soul suppression, while Zabuza tells him to cram it, as he's going through something over here, asserting that he's not even meant for this world anymore, and thus giving full permission to Guy to finish him off, with Lee happily there to back him up. At which point, despite the way the relationship ended, Kisame's master Fuguki forms up with him, whilst the likes of Sakura and Kakashi decide to take on Kushimari Kuriare, Jinpachi Munashi, and Jinin Akibino. Though this doesn't exactly even the odds, as a few more familiar faces populate the grouping, including the likes of former Kiba sword wielders Raiga Kurotsuki and Ringo Amayuri, not to mention Mangetsu Hozuki himself, and one Zabuza really thought he'd never see again, Juzo Biwa, the man who could be considered the closest thing to his master. Seeing these remaining four swordsmen form up behind Haku, picking up drop katana and ninjato around the battlefield. It is in this moment that Mangetsu makes his opening move with the Master Scroll, snagging Kubikiri Bocho from under Zabuza and seeing it appear in the grasp of Juzo, while the other 5 swords make their way into their most skilled wielders' hands amongst the enemy. Seeing Kisame of course reunited with Samehada, and now able to have his cake and eat it too, now able to use it alongside his predecessor. Zabuza for a moment notes his strange the Kiba swords weren't snatched from Sasuke, hoping that he possibly broke them to make his and Naruto's job later on a lot easier on him, since he already now has to steal his own blade back. Assessing all this, Zabuza pulls his bandages down for a moment to give a weak smile back to Haku, and return the greeting, having a far less happy mood in stark contrast to their 2 current states of living. However, this assumption of what he's smiling at is incorrect, as he realizes the visions of Haku is only one of many, all surrounding him in a dome. He's constructing the remainders of the fading mist Zabuza created for the Shinobi Alliance, and a new hidden mist jutsu from Juzo, which allows Haku and his new allies to employ this strategy to its maximum effect. As now, Zabuza must defend himself from a hellish rain of Sinbone with the speed of light, a former wielder of the Executioner's Blade and Silent Killing all while unarmed, as well as that Hydrification Kekkei Genkai, in congruence with the original master of the Flatfish Blade, and then 2 more Kenjutsu masters, with regular, yet still very deadly swords on top of all that. As this is happening, Haku fights against Kabuto's control to confide in his old master, but it's strange and agonizing to be actively aware of 2 opposing objectives. His desire to protect the precious life and bonds Zabuza has made in their time apart here in the land of the living, even despite his old philosophy and ambition, while at the same time, part of him is hearing out a malevolent serpent offering him power, eternal life, and the possibility to reunite with the one he loves most as they both dreamed, should he just take Zabuza's life and have him join them. While Zabuza similarly laments this battle, and the fact that their positions are not swapped, knowing wholeheartedly Haku would have gone much farther and achieved much more had he been the one fate favored that day. He is also aware of the fact that he has cut past that old fangless demon he once was, that if he wishes to honor all Haku has given him, it means go even farther beyond the boy as well. Even in this deadly situation, full of direct violence and multiple enemies unfit for an assassin, Zabuza still finds himself feeling extremely present, calm, and aware. First and foremost, clearly deducting the most optimum way he'd kill a target if he were Juzo, with this use of his imagination allowing him to duck a swipe meant to slice him from his liver to his heart, catching the whole of the blade, and leveraging it to lift the older swordsman off his feet, leaving him vulnerable for a vicious push kick, which sees the former master of the Executioner's Blade sent crashing through an ice mirror, with enough force to break it and his body, thus allowing him to be sealed, even with the numbers a tad. Now with his trusty sword back, he has something for greater defense, and so this time blocks the shots of water from Mangetsu used to open him up, something the former Kiba sword wielders attempt to capitalize, forcing Zabuza to use a tool he's yet to really try out much, at least not since Kakashi and Jiraiya convince him of its utility, slipping a scroll from one of his pockets, unfurling it, and sliding a finger coat in his blood on it to activate a summoning contract. At which point, a pack of small fuzzy creatures appear around Zabuza to watch his back, catching the 2 twin sword users by the wrist and mauling at them to leave Zabuza an opening to push them out of the dome as well, where his summons continue the assault and aid the Alliance in sealing them too. While he comments those Wolverines really are damn good at what they do, and just like they said, it's not very pretty, making a note to be sure to thank Kakashi later. Before he knows it, however, Haku's assault becomes more ferocious than ever, as it covers the water pressure slashes of Mangetsu and makes extra moisture to form the Thousand Ice Fingers jutsu, which sees the Executioner's Blade quickly whittled down to very little from the assault. In this moment, Kabuto makes Mangetsu take a vicious gamble once again, using his Master Scroll one final time to steal the broken blade and leave Zabuza defenseless, allowing Haku to land a seemingly vital blow head-on that leaves him woozy and open for execution himself. Though whether because of the original demon's iron will, this strange and locked in and constantly evolving state of mind this war is evoked from high-level shinobi, or even the constant writhing and rebelling of Haku's soul under Kabuto's control, this attack is not actually vital, merely a sin bone embedded into the fist used to block it, the worst of it being the amount of bleeding it causes, at which point Zabuza is more than happy to use this as an impromptu weapon, punching it into Mangetsu's face and sending him reeling, and Zabuza does something he discovered in the battle with Kisame, and channels his chakra into his blood, at which point the Kubikiri Bocho itself returns to the very red liquid which carries the iron and absorbs vampirically, slipping from Mangetsu's grasp only to reform good as new in Zabuza's, allowing him to subsequently split the younger swordsman in 2 with a chakra-enhanced bloody blade, while he huffs the title second coming of the demon seems a bit presumptuous. The first coming of the demon ain't even over, since he's the one who truly awakened the abilities of the Kubikiri Bocho. If it's formed solely of its wielder's blood, they can exert perfect control over it for its own kind of sentience. Now left alone in the dome with nothing but ghosts of Haku left to accompany him, Zabuza readies for his second wind, wrapping his other hand that the blades of Samehada hadn't already dug into when he took it earlier that day. And as the temperature drops lower again, he knows it's a sign from Haku that he's coming at him once more. So using the Kubikiri Bocho and a windmill shuriken spun like a shield to defend himself, he does the best he can to no longer be a pincushion, merely taking pot shots and strikes to non-vital areas by the undead assassin, that by now he's all too used to, after raising the boy and Moegi after him, though the slowing cold the needles inject into him is much more unpleasant than he remembered. Wanting to end this stalemate, retaliate. Haku innovates, keeping up his pressure until frost and moisture form on Zabuza's gigantic blade in excess, enough to form a crystal ice mirror on it and attack directly from his blind spot as he swings it. Though preempting a move like this is a dirty, no good, rotten thing to do, and one that he tried many times to convince Haku to use for more effective assassinations, ironically. And had this been 3 years ago, he'd surely be dead. But now, he has something that can not only cover him in that fraction of a second, but also bust him out of this mirror dome. His gift from becoming a son of the Hidden Leaf, igniting his blade with chakra to use the helmet splitter jutsu, whilst the anger and grief from the battle leak in to tinge the bright blue chakra with shades of the demon. As at point blank range, Haku is forcefully blown away and violently slammed against his own dome as Zabuza shreds through it, leaving Haku's body vulnerable for support shinobi to finally assemble at Zabuza's back. At which point, they begin sealing him, making Zabuza obligated to protect them as he's forced to say another painful goodbye to his adopted son. Haku, however, is elated in this moment, asserting that he is sure now, when Zabuza's time does come, they will be reunited. Now once again forced to wipe his tears and reevaluating the battlefield, Zabuza sees that things are far better for his allies now than beforehand, as most of the swordsmen have been dealt with or are handled by a competent enough shinobi like Kakashi, since as expected, Guy and Lee were able to handle their tag match, as Fuguki is in the midst of being sealed, and Kisame is left unable to move any further, being held down by the Leaf's twin beasts as he awaits the same fate, while Zabuza steps closer, wanting to say another proper goodbye. Seeing this, the Sharkman chuckles, and this time accepts his fate, verbally admitting he's been bested, while Zabuza simply tells him he hopes the battles in hell can keep him satisfied. Though as he says this without any more malice to his tone, Kisame grins that it seems despite it all, they somehow became friends anyway. So as he's being sealed, Kisame gives his newly proclaimed friend one final gift, instructing Samahara to help the other swordsman out, which sees it cease its weeping and retract its hidden blades as Zabuza picks it up. Because Kakashi is still engaged with Kushimaru and the few remaining swordsmen, Zabuza decides to step in, tossing him the Kubikiri Bocho, and instructing his other allies to pick up a missed sword at once around, since it's time they run through the rest of this fodder and go home. And nodding with a look of grave determination under his mask, Kakashi agrees, as the two joining form up, since it's plain to see that they're both furious. Meanwhile, in separate faraway places, the long-awaited arrival to the battlefield of the two swordsmen who will shape the future of the shinobi world has finally come, and so the final act of this war begins. Alright, that's finale act 2. We are moving along because this is already over 15 minutes and I don't want this to be too long, but I'm really happy with how things are turning out. I originally had it planned for this part to be a lot shorter and a lot more low-key, but when I went back and read the manga chapters from this kind of adaptation stuff, I remembered that the Zabuza Haku stuff was kind of underwhelming when you really get down to it, since Haku got one-tapped and Zabuza really just kind of rehashed old stuff. Don't get me wrong, it sets up stakes, it sets up like what the conflict between the shinobi and the Edo Tensei is and a lot of other things, but still it's just not a very intriguing fight in terms of actual choreography. Hence stuff like Storm 3 really embellishing it. It's also why I kind of beefed up the fight for Zabuza, so it's not just him versus Haku, because that would have honestly been really easy for him, considering even as an Edo Tensei, Kakashi again just kind of one-shots him. So hopefully the idea of them being Edo Tensei and not all being armed with actual swords of the mist isn't of a factor to give you Zabuza running through a bunch of the swords of the mist. I thought that was just too good an option not to have in this story, and it's definitely one I've had in my mind since I started this back like 5 years ago. Now we're coming near the climax, but I still think this story will have an epilogue and at least a redux of what will likely be parts 1 through 3 to expand on a few things and add a few things there. But regardless, we can truly say this story is about to wrap completely up. That is, unless I decide to do a Boruto era sequel series, which becomes more and more likely the further I get into Two Blue Vortex. Anyway, shoutouts to Valerius Via for the custom artwork used in this part, Pickle Deal for brainstorming with me and a script review, and to you all for watching. Do me a favor though and go ahead and leave a like as well as subscribing, since that's a great way to support the channel. And speaking of supporters, our special supporter shoutouts of the day go to Omar Cousins, Snow Slash Memes and More, Stephen Norton, Taryn, The Shadows, Moonshot Media Inc., and Talon Wolf. But with that said, as the rest of the names of those lovely people scroll on screen, I have little else to say but take care of yourselves and the world around you. Believe it, and as always, go beyond plus ultra. See you next time.